Okay, so we are doing some crazy full spectrum coloring. I just wanted to remind you that you could always composite in your coloring. So I took this little bunch, I really stretched it out so it's pretty soft. So this is kind of soft edge duotone, right? And now I'm going to cut it out. So I go back to my vector line work, I use contiguous, I select all the space on the outside, and then I delete that from this color that I brought in, just like that. And then I can play with it in terms of its layer style, like that. That's kind of a nice Easter card, right? I can play with its opacity. I can push it in all kinds of different directions, right? This is an example of full spectrum color. And some of them just look really hideous, right? Let's see. I think I liked what this one was doing. No, soft light, let's do that. Okay, there we go. And then I can take its opacity down. And you can kind of see how that full spectrum color works. So that's a really quick way to get a lot of variation within kind of open space, right? All right, so that's full spectrum color. I could also Gaussian blur if I want to change a hard edge coloring example to a soft edge. So let's look at my hard edge right here. I'm going to make a duplicate of it. And then what I'm going to do with this cut edge duotone is I'm going to change it to a soft edge by going to filter, and this is the only filter we'll consistently use, which is called Gaussian blur, and just take focus away. See, so it changes my cut edge into a soft edge. Now the problem with that is then that color extends beyond my outline because it also softened it beyond my black outline. And that's a no-no. We don't want that. So what do? I go back to my vector, I select the empty space on the outside, and I delete that away from my soft edge duotone. So it's soft on the inside, but crisp around the edges. And then I can even try just layering in this full spectrum color and dropping it down through my different layers, right? At different opacities, different modes. All kinds of different things I can play with and see. So I kind of like that. Let's see, color burn, no. Darker color, yeah, so I like darken. And that just gives kind of some interesting tones. And then of course I can play with the hue saturation of that full spectrum color, kind of push it into different areas. And I can play with its saturation and its brightness. And you just have, unlimited opportunities. That's what's great about digital art. All right, now we're going to learn about color holds and special effects that would happen on top of our vector line work. So that's what this video is going to be about. But really quickly, I'm going to do the same thing I did here just to review it and bring in some full spectrum variation for my bird, because maybe I will play with that later. You never know. All right, so I'm going to go underneath my vector line work for the bird, and I'm going to paste in this little cutout from that chameleon artwork. And basically I'm just stealing shapes, stealing paint textures Then just like we did with our cloud, I'm going to stretch it, roll it out like dough to cover up my artwork on all sides. And then I'm going to select around my vector shape using the magic wand. But better yet, I'm going to do it around my flat color layer, right? Then I'm going to select the inverse, and then I'm going to delete it from that composited full spectrum color. Whoops, I don't need to select the inverse. There we go. So now I have that full spectrum color as an option. Let's try putting it with screen. I like some of the variation it gives there. It's very subtle. Pin light, soft light. Let's do pin light, but with less opacity. All right, so get a little bit of that full spectrum color in there. And I can move it down through some of my layers as well. It's kind of nice. All right, so anyway, so that's what I have right now. I'm going to save it because I haven't saved it yet. Shame on me. And this is going to be my spot illustration. I have to do save as. I'll continue to work on this as a poster in the next assignment and maybe add text with it, right? But I think it's a bad idea to do all of your coloring and finalize it all in one sitting, because often you just have to kind of explore the piece a little bit to begin with. Okay, so in saving it, because this is at 16 by 20 inches at 350, and because I have multiple Photoshop things open, it's very important to save your work. Because as you can see, the computer can be quite slow, and we don't want it to glitch out, which is what it might be doing at this very moment. All right, so whenever we save, we want to use our name. So I'm going to call this Karl Assignment 7 Full Color Spot Illustration. As a PSD, a working file format to the desktop. Now I'm going to add some special effects. So far, all of the coloring we have done has been behind our vector. What if I want to put something on top of our vector? What if I want to make their eyes glow white and have a highlight? So what do I do for that? This is what's called a color hold. So I'll do it on the bunny first, right? So here's the bunny with the vector line work. Here's the bunny without it, right? What's nice is I have my flat color layer where I can select, because I flatted it, individual aspects of each layer. And so remember, flatting will always make your decisions a little bit easier as you work. Right? So erasing out that eye from the full spectrum layer. And I could always just use a direct eraser as well. Okay, so next, color holds are anything that goes above your vector. So I'm going to make a new layer, and let's just paint something. So what if I wanted a white highlight right here, kind of soft and coming on top of the eye? It doesn't mean I rasterize my vector. I can give his nose a little bit of a highlight too, or his paw, right? Or it's the shininess of the hair. I want it to actually affect over the top of the vector line. So what you see is I'm actually painting on top of my vector. So if I do a black background, you can see that. Or if I do a gray background, you can see it. Now, the difference between this and just duotoning, whether it's hard-edged or soft-edged, is I'm actually affecting the black line work as well. It's going on top of it. This is what's called a color hold, because the printer has to hold that area off from the black ink, what's called a full bleed of the black ink. Now that's one option I have. Another option I have to mess with the line work itself is to just do a color overlay on the vector itself, right? And I can do that on a duplicate just to be safe, but keep it as a vector and then double click, because remember you can add layer styles to vectors, and do a color overlay. And let's say I want, the bunny to have a blue outline instead of a black outline, right? Or if I want a green, or what might look good with red, like a brown, right? So that's also a color hold, because you are replacing the black line of your vector with a color, no matter how subtle. Now, just like you can do a color overlay, and we did this with our logos, you can do a gradient overlay for your line work as well, which can look really good. So what if I choose like a rainbow? This is going to be god-awful, but to go with the full spectrum, I could do a rainbow fill for my line work. Come on. I have too many things open. I need to close some things. So if I do this kind of full rainbow, you can see it there in the line work now, over the top of my black vector lines. Now, the problem is all this stuff on the outside. It looks fine when it's on white, right? These color holds. But it looks terrible when it's on a darker background. And a spot illustration has to work on any background. So what do? Well, I take my color hold layer, which I usually label all in caps, because this is special and goes above your vector layer. It's like the olive on top of a sandwich. And I'm going to go back to my flat color or to my vector layer, select all the way around it with contiguous turned on, and then delete that from my color holds. So it's still nicely contained, right? With every kind of background. And then I can play with how much opacity I want on these color hold layers. And I can play by rasterizing it. That's why I did a copy of my vector, because then I can rasterize the layer style, rasterize those effects all into something that I can erase with my eraser and let the black show through in certain places. Right? So now that it's all rasterized, I still have my vector underneath, but I can go in with my eraser at a low opacity and kind of bring back the darkness of the eye in some places, right? Bring back the darkness of the back of this leg, at least in the vector outline, and the back of this leg. And really control these things. The inside of the ear. Let the computer catch up with me. Right. So those are called color holds. Let me now make some final decisions. So let's say this is what I want, right? I have some other options. What if I'm going to do a really dramatic color hold for my bird? I'm going to duplicate my bird's vector line work, and I'm just going to do a white color hold on it. So instead of a black outline, I'm going to do a white outline. And that could be any color, but I'm going to fill it with white. So I just want a color overlay, and I'm not brown, I want white. Right. Normal mode, okay, 100%. So why does it look gray? It should look white.